Thank you for joining us. My name is J.R. Gonzalez. I'm going to be your host, and this quick little webinar is being brought to you by TAMAC, the Texas Association of Mexican American Chambers of Commerce, a 47-year-old organization based here in Texas. We're also partnering with Texas Mutual Insurance to bring you this valuable information. Today's guest is going to be the Vice President of Sales with Solve HR, a 20-something-year-old company, Latino-owned, who is operating in 48 states. And with this, I want to introduce our guest today, Leonard Trinidad. Leonard, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me today, JR.
Leonard, thank you so much for being with us today. We're going to be talking about the importance or the benefits of workplace safety. This is one of the things that a lot of people don't realize. When they're trying to save money to their bottom line, or when they're trying to retain good employees, workplace safety is a very significant issue, and a lot of people don't think about it. So I know you have prepared for us some tips, about 5 tips that you're going to go through today on the importance of workforce safety and how that can benefit a company and add to your bottom line. So Leonard, go ahead and take it away, sir.
Okay, thanks, JR. Again, I appreciate the introduction. And I guess what I will do is I'll start by saying one of the things that most businesses or just the average consumer thinks about when they're thinking about workplace safety are typical manufacturing type jobs where you can potentially get injured because you're, up on a ladder or you're doing construction work. But the truth of the matter is, and I'll touch on a point later on, is workplace safety should be and practice should be instilled into every business that we're participating in, whether that's a law office or whether it is a construction type field. Workplace safety needs to be something that's constantly on top of each person, especially a business owner's mind. So what I'll share with you right now is a PDF that here at Solve HR that we've created and we tend to share with customers and discuss with them during their tenure with us. So there's 5 points that an average owner or C-level suite or manager at a company is kind of really should be paying attention to in terms of their workforce. So I'll hit on each point one by one, and then I'll go in a little bit in depth to it, and then I'll click back to the video as we're going back and forth. So the first point, and what I will say too, I'm sorry, each one of these points, as you'll start to notice as I'm talking about them, they interact with each other. They're dependent on each other, and you'll see why. Because when it comes to workplace safety and cost, everything has to deal with the employees. Everything has to do with risk, and everything has to do with what happens after either an accident happens or before it does. So the first point I like to make is when there's a workplace safety program in place for a company, there's an average of 40% reduction in cost. And it's directly related to the injury and workplace injuries, and that's per OSHA. So on average, and this was per OSHA, on average, where that 40% comes from is the average injury, according to OSHA, is about $42,000. That's the average claim. So when you think about companies that are either running lean, you think about what they're trying to do to attract and retain talent, especially during COVID. 42,000 is something that the most business owners aren't planning on just throwing away at any given time. And then if we look outside of injury, just workplace violations in terms of paperwork, the average violation that OSHA sees, and this was as of last year, is about $4,000. So, what does a company do when they're hit with an injury suit, as well as maybe that documentation that they had was either filled out correctly or didn't exist for whatever place? Those fines and penalties can start to add up pretty quickly. Again, if you're not prepared for it and you're a small business owner, or even a large business owner, your exposure becomes applicable to the number of employees you have. So it's one thing that you have to always consider in terms of creating a safe workplace for you.
Leonard, you bring up some good points. We're talking about 40%, up to a 40% savings a company can have. And you say these statistics come from OSHA. So as OSHA that regulates a lot of industries, how about those industries that are not necessarily construction or high risk related that, maybe a small business. I'm sure there's a lot of businesses out there that aren't in construction, but also want to know the benefits of having a work safety program.
Yep, yep, good point. And what's funny is before this webinar was getting going, I was doing a little bit of research, and first and foremost, OSHA oversees everything, whether it's construction or whether you're a veterinary clinic. But I wanted to just do a little due diligence myself and figure out exactly, what types of businesses are typically hit the most with workplace safety violations. And the number one industry is nursing care and residential care facilities. So you're thinking about the private sector, you're thinking about those people that are interacting in the medical field. That is actually the number one injury claim industry.
So it's not
Followed
construction. I mean, construction's up there, but it's not necessarily construction industries.
Well, what's funny is I looked at the top five. So number one's nursing care. Number two is animal production. So workers responsible for raising and feeding animals. Number three is couriers. And couriers goes into delivery services. You think about people behind a vehicle, right? Behind a wheel. Four is wood product manufacturing. And number five is air transportation. So construction didn't even make the top five. We always gave the scenario of, an employee comes into the office and they trip up the stairs. That's a claim. A customer, an employee goes and they unplug a lamp and they electrocute themselves. That's a claim, right? So it happens a lot more in other industries than you think, again, because of the biases to think a labor intensive job means injury. Not always the case.
So Leonard, on that, what you're talking about, and number three, courier service, that could be anything from a UPS or Amazon delivery person to a pizza delivery guy.
Correct. The minute you get behind the wheel of that car, it's a risk.
Wow. So
Or
one
by
more time, Leonard, can you go over those before we move on to the next section? Would you mind going over those top five again of statistics that show where injuries are related and the types of businesses?
Yep. So number one again was nursing care or residential care facilities. So again, alluding to the medical industry. Number two is animal production, and animal production means the raising and feeding of animals. Couriers was number three. So that's everything from professional messengers to your LTL freight carriers. Number four was wood product manufacturing. So workers in plants and factories that assemble wood or, dealing with wood. The injury rate in that industry alone is 5.9 per 100 workers. So it's high. And then air transportation. So that includes pilots, people that work on aircrafts, mechanics, people that are loading planes, cargo freight. That same thing. That's at 5.8, right below wood manufacturing. So those are the top five.
Okay. And I think you made a point that a lot of people don't realize. I know I didn't realize it, that OSHA oversees everybody, not only construction, but even to the small mom and pop businesses.
Yep.
And that 40% savings that you talked about, you can look at it that if you have things in place, you can save 40%, or if you don't have things in place, you can actually cost your business another 40% of expenses.
Exactly.
Okay. Let's go on to number two that you have, Leonard.
Sure. So let me go back to this PDF for you really quickly. So number two is increased productivity. So the top benefits of effective workplace safety and health programs are increased productivity and reduced costs. So that's an easy one to think about, right? So when you have employees that aren't injured, when you have employees that are safe in their job, they become more productive, right? The happier we always talk about, especially to business owners look at savings in four different ways. It's around revenue, cost of goods sold, operational expenses, and non-operational expenses. So with revenue is directly associated to employees. The happier they feel at work, the safer that they are at work, the more productive they are at work, the lower it costs you to run your business because your employees are there, they're showing up on time, they're gaining knowledge, they're getting better at their jobs every day. That productivity increases. As of 2020, and it's always been around 40%, and so we'll throw COVID in there for being a little more aggressive, but as of 2020, and this is according to Gallup, 36% of workers in workplaces are actually engaged. So you got 36% of the people that are at your company that are fully engaged into their job. The rest of the percentage, that's exactly what it is. It's a job. It's something that they show up to. They work, they show up, they go home. They don't think about it twice. That engagement's not there. So if you can make sure that what is it, 24% of employees that are actually engaged in the workplace are taken care of, are treated properly, feel safe in their environment, that productivity goes up. And not only that, but you start chipping away at that workplace engagement number. If you can get it, the higher that number of engagement, that's how much more profitability you'd see in a company. And it starts with making sure that you have a safe environment for employees to be at.
It's interesting. So one more time, the amount of people that are actually engaged in the business itself as productive employees is what you said, 36%?
36%.
Wow. Can I have names of the people that are not engaged?
Really? We all want that, right?
We want those names.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, that's an
And
interesting statistic. So about 36% of people are there because they want to be and are being productive and going that extra mile. And the rest of them are just
it's
there to get a
paycheck.
paycheck.
It's paycheck.
And will probably at the first sign of a better opportunity or what, just kind of like, thank you very much and move on to the next job. Wow.
Yeah, yeah,
Good.
exactly.
So it definitely pays to take care of your employees, make sure they're in a safe work environment, and just add to that any little edge you can to try to keep them. Because I know replacing employees right now, especially in this market, it can be very, very difficult.
Oh, yes, it definitely is.
Okay, let's go on to the third of your 5 points, Leonard.
Sure. Let's see. Number three. So at number three, it's improvements in health, safety, and wellness for your employees, which can in turn affect general morale. So again, I mentioned earlier how all these bullet points start interacting with what they are, but that's exactly what it goes into, right? So when when you create an environment where your employees feel comfortable in, where they feel that they're not going to be injured in, or their wellness is being taken into consideration, you create happier employees, you create more productive employees, you create employees that are going to ensure that they're doing their job correctly, that take pride in their work, and make sure that back to that employer, that engagement is there. So when you have when you have employees that are in a better mood in terms of morale, not only does it help reduce injury, but that injury has a direct correlation into your workers' comp, right? So every time there's an injury, your workers' comp modifier, which is the basis per, $100 per employee that's at your company, the more injury, the more claim that you have, that modifier, which is at a neutral one, goes up. The longer that you are and you're having that work safe environment and you're keeping those employees happy, that workers' comp number goes down. That's a direct impact into the revenue of the company. It's a direct, that money can now be used to do better things with the company, to do more for the employees, to give raises, to provide more for them, throw a Christmas party, whatever that is. That's all the stuff that makes employees happier. Um, and that starts again with making sure that the environment is simply safe.
Okay. Now, Leonard, I know it's important to have workman's comp insurance, but let's be realistic. Not everybody has workman's comp. So I can definitely see the value of a safe work environment, the increased morale of employees to hopefully engage maybe above that 37%. But do you have any recommendations or suggestions for those businesses that are small businesses that may not have a workman's comp program in place now? Or is there any alternative for them? Because sometimes it's just too costly.
Yeah, good question. One interesting fact, however, is Texas is the only state in the US that does not require workers' comp insurance. The other 49 states in the US require it. We're Texas, right? We do what we want. The thing I will tell you about workers' comp insurance, and we recommend this to anybody, can it be pricey? Yes. A lot of times it's probably a lot cheaper than you actually think it is because it's based on the number of employees, what type of work they're doing, and what their annual wage is. So there's a little bit of math that's associated with it. But the way you got to think about it is you get car insurance, right? And you don't get car insurance because you plan on getting in a wreck. You're there just in case. So if something were to happen, even as a small business owner, would you rather pay a $42,000 injury claim or would you rather spend $5,000 a year in workers' comp insurance? Right? So it's something to definitely think about in terms of, does the result of me not having it equal out to what I'm trying to do with my business? And then again, Texas doesn't require it, but the minute your small business becomes a business that you want to start expanding to and you want to go to New Mexico, Louisiana, or Oklahoma, you're going to have it regardless. It's a good practice to have workers' comp insurance. Again, not necessarily, but why wouldn't you? The cost of what it is definitely going to outweigh the fines and the penalties that can be associated with it.
And all it takes is one claim to actually put a small business out of business if you don't have workman's comp.
Immediately, yes. And that's what it is. It's insurance. It's workers' comp insurance in case something were to happen.
Okay. Next item.
Yep. So next thing, again, it related to point number 3, which is related to point number 2, which is related to 1, better retention rates, right? So businesses that instituted workplace safety programs saw a 7% increase in employee retention. Again, goes back to engagement, goes back to morale. But if you look at what turnover was for last year, the turnover in the US, and this has everything, voluntary, involuntary, COVID, it's everything in there, right? So the more you chip out of it, the more that number goes down. But the turnover in the US last year was 57%. So more than half of the workforce last year turned over. And now the average cost for, and this is according to SHRM, which is the Society for Human Resource Managers. This is typical, anybody in HR's, either gets information through them or is certified by them. But of that 57% turnover, the average cost is 33% of an employee's salary when they exit. And then when you have to hire somebody, the average cost of a new hire, thinking about the time spent, whatever goes on in terms of onboarding, is about $4,100. So who you hire these people, right? Why of course, if there's something that's shouldn't be being done at your company, but you invest money, you invest time into these people, why wouldn't you want to keep them and retain them, right? Why bring that number of that 57% retention into play? Because there's so much more cost that's associated with it. When you don't have the work safety programs in place with the company, right? It can lead to lower morale. It could lead to injury. Everything that we talked about, in the other 3 bullet points, and all that again has a direct cost. It's costs that we never think of, but you can truly put a hard dollar to it. 33% of a salary for an exit, $4,100 for onboarding an employee. Why not take the time, the investment, have your workers' comp insurance, have the work and safety program in place, and you mitigate the costs of that down the road.
Okay. I can definitely see for medium to larger size companies, those figures. Leonard, do you have any statistics? Let's say just a family owned operation, 4 to 5 people. I mean, I know those figures are going to vary a little bit, but is there, do you know of any statistics dealing with smaller companies or micro businesses, if you will?
So the interesting to think about is this percentage, again, according to SHRM, this is across the board. So when you think about, well, what does that mean to me across the board? What that means is a smaller business is going to have a greater impact when 33% of that number is affecting their bottom line. Coca-Cola is not necessarily worried when John Doe walks out the door because they're going to replace them with somebody else, right? Over the thousands of employees that they have. Is there a cost? Yes, but per economies of scale, it's that much less. this percentage carries over to the small mom and pop businesses, and that's why it affects them that much more.
Okay. Makes sense. Makes sense. Let me ask you this, especially in the Latino community, a lot of businesses are family owned,
Yep.
but because they're a family member, does that mean that they're precluded or protected from any type of lawsuits or some of these other things that may occur?
So that is one of the biggest pushbacks that we'll see with customers that we speak to. We're family owned, my brother is this, and we hired my cousins, this and that. Uh, it's great. And then they're always shocked when families file claims, when families sue, when families begin an argument within a place of business, and it affects them directly. I would say that what we've come to know is when we have those family run businesses, those claims are a lot higher, because family is more comfortable around family, to be quite honest, right? When an employee doesn't have that tie to the business, there a lot of times there's no love lost, right? They'll leave if they're not happy. If they feel like it's an unsafe environment, see ya, I'm going over to ABC company that's going to pay me $5 more. Family tends to be tighter in that way. So when something does typically happen, it's there for the long haul, and it's a little bit harder to get rid of.
Okay, good to know. All right, Leonard, our next point.
Yep. So the biggest thing, right, of course, with the benefit of workplace safety program, it's reducing risk, reduce risk of serious employee injuries and fatalities. Um, when I was talking a little bit earlier about what we speak to business owners with how they save money in the long run, right? So the last thing we talk about is non-operating expenses. So what non-operating expenses there, what those are is it's that cost that you never expect that you'll need to pay out or that you'll need to use. So non-operating expenses are fines, penalties, stuff that can't be written off at the end of the year, for your taxes. It's stuff that you get stuck with, that you wish that hadn't happened. So when you have a workplace safety program in place, what does that consist of, right? It typically consists of a safety manual. It tells an employee in that manual what their duties are, how they should approach their job, what a safe workplace environment is. It usually consists of trainings, which are typically ongoing. It can include knowledge checks. Sometimes safety, like I said, because of the businesses that we run into that should have programs in place, right? Sometimes it's making sure you have an ergonomic chair. Sometimes it's making sure you have wrist protection. It's making sure the cords are out of the way, that stairs are marked correctly, that type of stuff. When that stuff is taken care of, you don't see the $42,000 injury claims, right? I think the average death suit was $1.1 million, rightfully so. It's a death, right? But that stuff, more than likely, that owner that year did not anticipate having. And that comes directly out of the bottom line. So the more that a business owner can do to reduce their risk and the amount that they're paying out on non-operating expenses, again, drives profit straight up to the ceiling.
Makes sense. So as people are calculating and putting out their spreadsheets and projections, that's probably one factor that a lot of people don't project is possible injury or even, heaven forbid, death, because that can definitely
Yes.
put a business out of business.
Correct. And I got to tell you, if you don't have a workplace safety program in place, it's probably something that you need to start putting a bucket line in your Excel spreadsheet for.
Well, let's talk about that before we go, Leonard. And these have been 5 points, very helpful points. I know I learned a lot. If somebody were wanted to start a safety program, where would they start? How would they go about establishing one?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways you can do it, right? There's tons of online learning. There you can hire, people that have experience around safety, safety managers, safety experience, things of that nature. I will tell you, and this is probably me being a little bit biased, but it makes the most sense. When you work with companies such as ours with Solve HR, what you're doing is you're outsourcing that risk and safety piece of your company, and it's one less thing that you have to worry about. We're in the business of making sure that you focus on what you got in business for, and we focus on what we're good at. So what we do is we work with companies, we institute those safety programs, we make sure proper policies, procedures are written down, established, trainings are being done, work site safety evaluations are being taken place. If an injury were to happen, how do you update that OSHA 300 log? Do you even know what an OSHA 300 log is? Um, Nobody has time for that. So you have one or two options. You either do the research, spend the time, which cuts into your bottom line, or hire a safety manager, or you look for a company like Solve HR that you can outsource it to, and it's one less thing that you have to think about at night.
Makes sense. And I guess just give you an analogy, for example, um, it's like a small company using a payroll service. Let
100%.
them worry about filing and the taxes and doing everything within the law, because they're professionals, they can cover that. So
Yep.
the same with an HR company, whether it be Solve HR or anybody else, possibly outsourcing that. Yeah, it's going to cost a little bit, but it's probably going to save you a lot of headache in the long run, just to making sure you do everything correctly.
Yep, and don't quote me on this stat. I'm trying to remember it off the top of my head, but businesses that outsource to companies like Solve HR, which are known as PEO, professional employment organizations, typically save about 20%, or I'm sorry, they're about 20% more profitable because it's one less thing that they have to worry about, and then you're reducing the work site safety claims. You're making sure your taxes are being paid on time with your payroll, et cetera, et cetera.
Makes sense. Well, Leonard, thank you so much for being here today. We're going to wrap this up. Leonard Trinidad with Solve HR out of San Antonio, Texas. Thank you for being here, one of our TMOC partners. Also, if you guys have any questions or have anything, please feel free to contact the TMOC office. Once again, my name is Jared Gonzalez. I've been your host today. And thank you for being here. And make sure you stay safe on the job. And 37% of my employees, I'm going to congratulate. I'm going to find the other ones that aren't as engaged. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you very much. And hopefully we'll see you next time.